Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of the Hockey Coach Podcast. I'm Kevin Muller here with co-host Matt Corthius. You can find Matt online at Hockey Pro Training. You can find me online at KevinM2Hockey on all social media. Matt, how are we doing today?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well, doing well. So today we're going to jump into the topic of winning cultures and what it takes. So one of the things I think is interesting about winning cultures is it's such a difficult thing to like put your finger on it, right? Because if it was a simple thing, every team would be the best. It would be super easy to build Stanley Cup winning teams. It'd be super easy to build, NBA championship teams, whatever the sport may be. But there's just so much that goes into it. And there's so much that's sort of on the intangible side of it and stuff that you can't measure, right? You can measure points. You can measure shift lengths. You can measure their Corsi, all that good stuff. But you can't measure some of the times what it is to be a winning player. And sometimes that might mean that you're going to have a player who's not the most talented player in the world, but he's invaluable to your team, right? And so it's interesting. So winning culture, Matt, I'm going to let you, what's one piece that you think is essential for creating a winning culture?
Well, I think what you said there was really good. And just to touch on that a little bit, I think winning culture is also along the lines of something you also need is chemistry, right? Everybody always talks about chemistry, which is also something that's pretty much, it's easy to define, but it's hard to create, right? And everyone's always looking for that right chemistry with their team, with their lines, with their coach, etc. So I think one thing you need within that winning team, that winning organization is chemistry. And I think the only way I can think about winning organizations for me is to look back on winning teams that I've had. And when you're kind of in the moment of those winning teams, those winning organizations, you maybe don't realize why everything's clicking, how it's clicking. But when I look back to the teams that I played on that won and the teams that I played on that lost, there was major differences. And I think the number one thing that I had written down that I thought about was mindset. I think there's a mindset to winning. I think winners in general have a different mindset than losers do. I think it's that simple. Winners think they can win. I saw Eric Thomas, a motivational speaker. He said it the best I've ever heard him say it. Winners win, period. Winners just win. People don't always know why. They don't know how, but they win because they can't accept losing. And so I think mindset is the first one I had written down here. And I think before the season even starts, before the playoffs start, before anything starts, you got to sit down with your team, with yourself, and try to develop that winning mindset. And I think there's a lot that goes into that. I think there's a lot of that that's just, natural to the person, to the player. But I think that's the one thing I had written down. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think part of that winners win thing, I think some of that becomes part of winners win because they work. And when I say that, it sounds obvious, but what I mean by that is they're not looking for an excuse, right? It's binary with winners. It's you either do it or you don't. And if you don't whine, you shut your mouth and you go back and you fight and you figure out what you have to change to be successful the next step, right? To make that adjustment. So I think so mindset 100%, like that's all between the ears.
Because I'm just going to interrupt you for a second here. Sorry, but I just had this thought come into my mind where I played in the same league for 10 years. I played with the same guys in that league for maybe 6 or 7 years. And there were some guys that just could not win. And I know it all came down to their mindset because after a few years, it just becomes, you start believing it. You believe you're a loser. You believe you're destined to lose. And so you lose, right? Where I got into a habit, a team I played at the end of my career were very successful because we were going to win. Everybody knew it. Everybody felt it. And so that just goes a long ways, right?
It does go a long way. And yeah, I mean, just like winning can become a habit, losing can become a habit, right? Because all of a sudden you don't think you're going to win, so you don't put the extra reps in, you don't put the extra time in to prepare your body, right? Maybe you go out and you go hang out with friends instead of hit the gym.
Because what's the point, right?
It snowballs. Because what's the point? And we're not going to win, right? And that right there is cancer to a team. Right? That mentality, that lack of discipline, that lack of focus, that lack of willingness to push through the struggle. Right? And I think people, one of the things that I've noticed is winners enjoy the process of getting there, right? And Matt, I know we both listen to a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, and he does podcasts almost every day. But he talks about it. He's like, it's not about, his goal is to buy the Jets. And so if you ever listen to his podcast, you'll know that because he'll say it about 57 times in every episode. He said it's to buy the Jets. But really what he says when he expands on that is it's not necessarily the actual act of buying the Jets. It's the process of trying to get himself to a position where he can do that. And I think that's the biggest difference, right? Where the loser mindset just goes with, it's not going to happen, so I'm not going to do this, right? I mean, it's pretty... it'd be more than an audacious goal to say, I want to buy, an NHL team. Mm-hmm. But if I love that process, if that's what gets me going, man, what a great goal, because then you can learn how to enjoy the process to get there.
Exactly. That's what he says it's all about. And he says once he does buy the Jets, he's going to be disappointed because the process is over, right? And that's what it's all about. And getting back to that process and that mindset of getting there, I remember, and the motivation to be a winner. My first 3 years in the league, when I played professionally, I made it to the finals every year. I think it was almost game 5 or game 7, the final game every year, and I lost. I lost every single year. And for me, there was no greater motivation than to get back to the next year and start over again, because I was not going to lose again. And I remember sitting in my car visualizing me winning, and it's just getting over that hump of losing and how driven that made me, right? And I think that's another one you can touch on. Like Gary's driven to buy the Jets. You have to be driven to win and win that championship for whatever reason it may be, right? I just knew myself I couldn't go to another finals and lose. For me, that was too much. That was embarrassing. Even though I was a young guy, it wasn't all on me, but still, it's like, how many times can you get there and lose? So you have to be driven to win. That was the next one I had down. You have to first have that mindset. And like you said, you have to put in that work, right? And so I'm going to touch on 2 quick ones here. It's that the mindset, being driven, and then having that goal. What is the ultimate goal, right? My ultimate goal is to win a championship, to hopefully get onto another league, to get onto another team, to get a better contract, because people want winners on their team, right? That's just how it works. And like you said, some guys aren't always the best player on their team, but they're the most driven, they're most competitive player that is just going to do anything it takes to win. So I think goals is important, like you just touched on. If you don't have that ultimate goal, what is the point of the process? How are you going to get up every day? How are you going to train every day? I know these guys that lost every day, they didn't get up every day to go train. They already had it in their head the what's the point attitude. It's like, I could see it. They'd show up at the rink, they'd be goofing off beforehand, and my team, we'd be in the room. We'd be focused. We might be joking around, but I think to just throw a bunch of things at you, confidence is also something that's just like, you can see it on winners. You can just see it, you can feel it. And when you get a group of confident, talented, they don't always have to be the most talented, but talented enough guys on one team, that's going to bring you the best chance to win, I think, from what I've seen in the past. Like, I've had a team where we had a couple superstars and then just the rest of the guys that were just willing to do what it takes to get to that ultimate goal. And I think that's the next thing you need to worry about as well is, are you willing to do whatever it takes to get to that ultimate goal? Are you willing to be a second liner instead of a first liner? Are you willing to block shots when you've never blocked shots before? A lot of guys are willing to do these things to win, and a lot of guys aren't, right? They just aren't.
Yep. Well, and that brings me into one of my next points, and that's leadership. And I think leadership has to be defined in 2 separate roles. And one is peer leadership and 2 is structural leadership, right? So peer leadership, very obviously, is the guys inside the locker room, right? And what people often think is, in order to be a leader, you have to have a letter on your jersey or you have to be a top line guy. And that's just flat out not the case, right? Because everybody in that locker room, everybody on any team leads in some way. And the question becomes, are you leading in a positive way within your role, or are you leading in a negative way within your role? And what are the effects on your team ultimately? Mm-hmm. And that's the part where I think a lot of people miss the boat, is they just don't understand that they are a leader, even if they don't have that letter. And they just allow their bad habits and they allow negativity and they allow jealousy to come in and pull that team apart. And that's a big problem if you're trying to build a winning culture, is you have to remove that attitude from the locker room.
And because, like we touched on, it's contagious, right? It's contagious. It's like, I can give you 2 quick tangible examples of 2 teams that I've played on that won. Both teams, I was the captain. In 1 year, I was the leader. For sure, I was the leader of that team. I was going to do whatever it took to win. No, we weren't losing. There's just no way we were losing. And yeah, we had a talented team. Yeah, we had a good group of older guys, mix of younger guys, but there was no fucking chance, pardon my language, I was going to lose that year. No chance. And so we ended up winning. It was fantastic. You got to hoist the cup. It was amazing. And the next time we won, I was once again the captain. We had a superstar player. We just had a superstar player straight up. He wasn't the best dressing room guy. And if you ever listen to this, I love you, but he wasn't the best dressing room guy. I tell him this all the time. He was super competitive. I've never seen a guy more competitive than this guy in my entire life. Whether it was Xbox, paying for a bill, talking to girls, this guy was not going to lose. And he was the leader that way, right? His work ethic and his willingness to get the job done, it was contagious. And he would not accept anything less from anybody else. And I had a love-hate relationship with the guy. He's a good buddy of mine till this day. I love him. He's great. But his willingness to win and his competitiveness would bring out the worst in him at times. And he would get after guys and he would get on guys in the wrong way because they couldn't bring it the way he brought it. But he was the leader of that team and he got us to win a championship. So like you said, there's different kind of leaders. And yeah, he had his faults, but still, he brought the rest of the guys up to his level and nothing else is going to be acceptable for him. So like you said, you got to find your way to lead. And yeah, not everybody's perfect, but it takes different players to get you there.
Yeah, it does. It takes a variety, right? If you have a bunch of one-dimensional players, right, and they're all super skilled offensively, but you have nobody to play defense, that might not be a winning formula, right? So everybody's got to embrace it. And there's some guys that are willing to step in front of a shot, and there's some guys that aren't willing to step in front of the shot. And there's some guys you would ask not to step in front of a shot if you're a coach, right? Because you don't want to get hurt. And so it's about embracing that role. And then obviously structural leadership has to do with the management of the program, the coaching of the program, the ownership of the program, and do those same characteristics that we talked about in terms of an individual successful leadership role. Does that still get translated with the structural leadership roles? Sure. And that's important, right? Because it's the old saying of stuff runs downhill. Well, at the end of the day, the players are at the bottom of that hill because you have the ownership, you have the management, you have the coaching staff. And some levels you can add scouting and everything in there, but that's what it is. And if the vision from the top isn't solid and it's not focused on winning, there's going to be continued lack of success or continued infighting and continued turmoil. And I think we can all probably name this team without naming them directly, but there was a team in the National Hockey League who sort of had suspect leadership for a long time. They made some changes and became very successful in the very recent past. And that's a big part of it, right? Is what's the leadership from the top doing to build that feeling in the locker room that this is a championship culture?
And I can tell you exactly what they're doing, because when you play in Europe and when you play where I played, it's a whirlwind of where you're going to end up and what the structure is going to look like and what the organization is going to look like. And I'm sure it's the same thing at the NHL level. And I myself was fortunate the last 5 years of my career to play for a team where the owner, he was the man. He was the man. He was successful. He had money, and he was determined to take care of his players. That's all he wanted to do, was take care of his players. It was the first time in my professional career that I saw that. Nice apartments, nice cars, team meals paid for, food after the game. And people will say, well, that should just be normal. Well, if you've ever played in Europe, that ain't normal. Paychecks paid on time, never missed a paycheck in 5 years. I played on teams where the paycheck would be a month late. Other guys in the league are dealing with the same thing, right? So if the guy down the road, their team's dealing with that, and I'm getting paid well. He paid us well. That was the next thing. He paid us well. He took care of us. And so like you said, it starts at the top. And this guy wanted to win. He had a bunch of money. He wasn't into partying. He wanted to win. He wanted to win in business. He wanted to win in life. And when he bought a hockey team, he wanted to win on the ice. And if he didn't win, boop, coach gone, see you later. If this player's messing up, boop, gone, see you later, right? And so that was the structure. That was the environment. And so when you're in another team that doesn't have money, doesn't have the luxury of a good organization set up properly from the start, because a lot of these teams they just get started up with whatever they got, right? They're just trying to do their best. And So if you want to get rid of a player, you can't. If there's a cancer within your team, you can't really do much about it. There's not really trades. So like you said, if it's not getting done at the top and the guy at the top's just there to joke around and be the owner who wants to show people he's the owner and talk about being the owner but doesn't make any moves or isn't committed, this guy would be at like every practice. He'd be in the coach's room after asking him, what's up with this guy? What's up with that guy? Sometimes it's too much, but I think he had a really good balance of saying, this is my team. I'm paying the bills. I want to win. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think if you don't have that, especially from your leaders, then you know what you're going to get, right? Your bottom end guy looks up to your top end guy. The middle guy looks up to the top guy. The bottom guy is always looking up. So you got to have those leaders set up from the get-go. And if you don't, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. And I think, you hit on an interesting point with sort of those teams that aren't maybe they don't have the luxury of having that owner that thinks that way, or maybe they're just getting started was one example that you gave. And I think the interesting part is we have to respect the fact that the teams that are just getting started can be successful if, and this is a big if, they accept and they embrace that bootstrap mentality of we're going to build something from nothing here, right? Because then all of a sudden they are doing the right stuff. They're showing up on time because they're taking ownership in that process. So that to me comes down to communication, which is another big piece of leadership and building a culture, right? Is that communication within. What's our vision? What's our goal? Why are we here? Right. And those are things that they sound like they're 30,000 foot, but that 30,000 foot affects the day to day. It affects the inches that you take when you hit the ice on practice.
For sure.
And if the owner is effective in communicating that, and management's effective in communicating that, and the coaching staff's effective in communicating the goal, the vision, the passions, what's going to take to win. Right. I think you're setting yourself up for a lot more success, because then at that point, the onus then becomes on the players, right? The players have to embrace the vision, and either they're in the right place or the wrong place in terms of, do they agree with that mentality? Do they connect with that mentality? Are they comfortable in that environment? Then, all of a sudden, if you get a bunch of guys who are scrappy and just going for it, they can be really tough to beat.
100%. Once you touch on that part of the onus on the players, it's like, it's this pass the buck mentality that I would always see on losing teams. Always, every single time, pass the buck. The owner is going to pass the buck to the sponsor who didn't pay. Then the coach is going to pass the buck to the owner who isn't paying. And then the players are going to pass the puck to the organization. Well, we're not getting paid, so it's like, what do you want us to do? You know what I mean? But, and of course, nothing always comes down to getting paid. That example also goes to well, he didn't move past me the puck on the power play. He didn't do this on the back check. That is the losing mentality every single time. When you start looking to other people for your success, the teams that I was a part of that won, no one thought that way. They were going to do it. I was going to do it. I knew the guy beside me thought the same way. The guy across the room thought the same way. My goalie thought the same way. He was going to win us the game. I was going to win us the game. I wasn't waiting for anybody else to win me the game, period. I was going to do it. And so when everybody has that attitude, that's a powerful attitude, very powerful attitude. Go ahead.
It's really powerful. And if you watch the playoffs this year, and I forget who actually said it. One of the announcers said it. He goes, listen, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, here's what's got to happen. Your superstars have to perform. Okay, that's a given, right? We all understand that. The top has to perform. Got it. Your goaltender needs to play unreal. Yep. Okay, I think every hockey guy can understand that. But they also said your rookies and your young guys have to overperform, right? And so that's a classic example of this is, the rookies, the guys who are just in the league, if they don't perform, you don't win a Stanley Cup. Now, you have a very interesting situation with Pittsburgh where Matt Murray is a rookie and he's won 2 Stanley Cups, technically, because he didn't hit contractually, he didn't hit the requirements in order to not be considered a rookie last season. So, I mean, there's a guy who, walked into the locker room with a veteran leader, with a veteran goaltender, but found a way to contribute.
I just think leadership is so huge in that aspect. It's like, if you're going to come into a team and see what Sidney Crosby's doing as a rookie, and that's not going to fire you up and motivate you to go out there and bust your ass, I don't know what's going to. And I know staying in the NHL is a motivator and all this. There's a lot of other motivators, but motivators can always be ramped up 5 or 6 degrees every single time, right? You're playing with these guys that are going hard. And it's like, I go back to the example of these losing teams. I look at the leaders that were on these teams. Give me a break. You know what I mean? Those guys would go hard when the going was good, but when the going gets tough, that's when you need your leaders to show up. When you get scored on in a 3-2 game, for them to go up a goal on the road and the place is rocking, that's when you need your leaders to say, let's fucking go, boys. Now it's time we go, right? Not you see the bench just shrivel and everyone's just like, well, we're screwed. No, and you see guys like Sidney Crosby and Malkin, they're like, let's go. You know what I mean? Like there's always a next level of competitiveness and fire in these players that winners just have. And like you said, pieces of the puzzle all have to come together and everything has to go well for teams to make it happen. But there's a reason certain teams win more cups than other teams. And yes, it comes down to individual talent like the Crosbys and the Gretzkys and the Lemieux, right? But there's a lot of teams that have that talent as well that just don't win. So there's always these intangibles that you can't control, and there's some you can control. And I think the best thing you can do is try to like just be that leader on your team as much as possible, even if you aren't the leader on your team, because someone's always looking at you. Someone's always looking for an excuse to work harder, and somebody's always looking for an excuse to take a fucking day off. That is one thing I've noticed, one thing I have felt, and one thing that I've done. I've seen my best player take a day off when I'm younger at practice. Guess what? Now I got my excuse, right? But when my boy Philly shows up and he's going 1,000 miles an hour every single practice, no matter how he feels, I got no excuse, right? So I think you always got to look to yourself. That's always my advice. Look to yourself and try to find it within yourself to get things going.
Yep. And if you think that you can be successful in this game without having solid resilience,
no chance.
You're wrong. Completely wrong. No chance. Because everybody, sometimes literally, most of the time metaphorically, will get punched in the face. Right? Yeah. Everybody's going to get punched in the mouth. And then it's, what do you do after you get punched? Do you sit there and cry about, oh, he hit me? You know, oh, we lost that game? Or do you get up and do you fight?
It's that bounce back effect. You got to have it. I'll just say, I'll cut you off again, but the teams we played on, we'd lose, we'd be pissed for 5 minutes, and then we'd all say to ourselves collectively, let's fucking get them. You know what I mean? We'd leave that rink more fired up than if we won the game, because we're like, you got to hate losing. You have to hate to lose. Right? You don't need to love to win, but you got to hate to lose. And I think most competitive players, man, some of the best players I've ever played with, you don't want to talk to them after a loss. And I was the same way. My wife would always say, when you lost, it's just like, I'll talk to you in the morning. Because it's just, you want to win. That's the point, right? What are you doing all this for? What are you doing all this for? It's fun. Yeah, great.
I'm still that way as a coach, right? Like my fiance knows that if we had a bad weekend, probably best to give me a little bit of space and till the next day. You know, that's what it is, because you're competitive, right? You put a lot of heart and soul and energy and sweat and tears into the program, and you know you want to be successful.
I agree. So I'm going to throw a question at you that I get often from people, not often the odd time, but people will say, like, when I'm kind of in a motivating place, they'll come to me and they'll say, well, Matt, I get it. You want to be fired up. You want to have a good attitude. What do I do when every single guy on my team is, I'm going to say it, he's a loser. He's got a bad attitude. He's moping. He's pouting. Like, what do I do? We've lost 6 in a row. We have no chance of winning the next one with this attitude. What do you do? What do you tell that player?
To shut up, put your head down, get to work, control the parts you control. Because until and inevitably, because I get this question a lot too, inevitably, that player always has something that they can do better. They always have something that's within their control that they're not doing everything they can do to change, right? And as soon as you start to focus on the external factors that are outside your control and ignore what's in your own control, man, you've already lost the game. It doesn't matter. Will your teammates bring you down? They certainly can. But is that a real thing that you have to be conscious of? It certainly is. But you know what? When you're so focused on what you can control, being a good teammate, hitting the training, right? Getting the extra reps in, getting the most out of the reps at practice. When you're that focused on that, guess what? You probably won't have time to worry about what your teammates are doing, thinking, saying.
For sure. And I would say the exact same thing, because think about what happens when 20 guys have that attitude. I've seen it where like half the team has that attitude. It's gross. And you're in trouble. You know what I mean? You're not going to be winning a game for a long time. And I think it takes strong individuals and strong leaders to recognize that you're in that habit, you're all in that pattern, and to snap out of it. Because it takes one guy to snap out of it. And sometimes it should usually be the coach that helps out in those moments, but it isn't always the fact. You don't always have a good coach. I know this for a fact. I've played on a lot of teams where I didn't have a good coach, period. Maybe they were good technically, maybe they had a good attitude, but they didn't have all the intangibles of the mental side of sports where it's like you can see your team's down, you need a kickstart, you need something positive to get them going, and it's not a bag skate. You know what I mean? Oftentimes coaches are like, well, you guys are playing like shit, let's go bag skate. Well, I don't think that's motivating to me. That's just going to piss me off more. So I tell the player the same thing. What are you doing? What have you done lately? You know what I mean? Are you getting into that negative, whiny mentality as well? Or are you trying to fire the guys up? And oftentimes, I've noticed some guys, they really want to do it. They really want to take the team over the hump. So what do? They start talking a bunch of noise in the room. Come on, guys, this and that and this. And it's like, it just gets to be a little bit much at certain times, right? Especially if it's a guy that's not producing. He's not actually working that hard. He's just talking. So I always say the same thing. Just shut up and just lead by example, right? I don't know Sidney Crosby personally, and I know I go on and on about Sidney Crosby lately, and I post about him every day, but I think he's a perfect example of a leader who probably doesn't say that much, just like Jonathan Toews, and they just get to work, right? I was the same way. I wasn't going to say a ton. I was just going to get to work. But guess what happens? When you just get to work and you show instead of talk, when you do talk, it has a major effect on the situation. People will then listen to you, right? That's the one thing I found in my career as a captain. I didn't say a lot, but when I did, people shut up and they listened. But if you're just that guy talking a bunch of noise all the time, no one's listening to you. They're just not.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
And your actions better match your words.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because you hit on it. If you're at the end of the day, good leadership is transparent.
Yeah.
So if I'm saying this and doing something totally different, players call you out on that real quick from a coaching standpoint, and players call each other out even quicker, right? Because peer-to-peer leadership is really transparent. And when let me tell you, when those don't align, there's big issues.
Because that's
there's
what happens,
issues,
right?
There's big trust issues.
The one guy's starting to talk a lot of noise, and someone says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "What are you doing?" And the other guy says, "Well, what are you doing?" And it's just like, then you're just infighting, and that's just a recipe for loss every day.
Oh, perfect. Well, I got a question here for you, Matt, that I'll let you field on this one. It says, I don't feel like I'm getting a shot on my team. I'm assuming that means from, my coach isn't giving me a fair shake. What should I do?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it just goes back to everything I always touch on. And trust me, I've been there. I've been that player that it's just like, what do I got to do to get this guy's attention? Do I got to stand up on the bench? You know what I mean? I've been there when it's like, I'm playing unreal. Can I get on the power play, coach, or am I just going to sit here and not play? Do I stand up on the bench? Do I say something? I'm like, what do I do? And I think it just comes back to grinding it out. It really does. Like, perseverance is a thing. You got to just keep showing up, because I've played with the guys who think they deserve a chance, and what do? They bicker, they whine to the coach, they go get a meeting, they talk to the owner, they go over his head, and it's like, you know what usually happens to that guy? See you later. You know what I mean? The coach doesn't want to deal with that. He's trying to deal with 20 guys, whatever the number is, and you're just one player, and you got to just keep grinding it out. Keep being in his face, showing him that you want it every single day. That's all I ever did. I just kept showing up. And I think I had a post on Instagram the other day just saying showing up equals success. And if you keep showing up and showing him how badly you want it, you will eventually get your shot. And when you get your shot, if you've put in that work and you've put in that time and that effort and you're ready, then you can show them. And I feel like I did that well in my life. I just kept myself ready. I got my chance, and thankfully the odd time I would do well, and then you just stick around, right? Everyone has to wait for their shot, right? Everybody. How long did you wait for your shot? 15 years? Right? You could say the same thing about your career, that you've been sitting there for 15 years trying to get noticed by somebody. Like, what the hell is going on here? But you didn't quit. You didn't go get another job or whine or whatever. You just kept showing up every single day. So that's my advice, because I don't see what the alternative is. What's the alternative? Get your dad to talk to the coach? I've seen guys do that at every level. Like,
oh yeah,
that's just going to set him off. So just
sets him off, right? Yeah, exactly. No, I fully agree with you. And I would say from the coach's perspective, the one thing that when I've had players in this scenario, one thing that I've always noticed is they're typically undervaluing the reps in practice big time. Huge. And what I mean by that is like, well, I don't know why I'm not getting a shot on the power play. And I come back and I just say real simple, well, because we ran power play 2 practices last week and you were terrible at it. You weren't engaged. You couldn't handle a puck. Like, yeah, you might be having a good game today, but why would I go outside the box if in a practice scenario, in a controlled environment, you can't prove that you can handle that? Why am I going to give you a shot when there's something on the line for it, right? And, it's not to say that you never give a guy a shot, but, again, if you respect the reps in practice a lot more, it's a lot easier. Coaches are humans. Last I checked, all coaches are humans, right? So humans, familiarity breeds comfortability, right? So if I see that you execute 10 out of 10 times that I give you during a week at practice and you execute it flawlessly and you're working your butt off, guess what? We get into that situation. If I think you're having a good game, you might get a shot at it. You might not, but you might. It's a lot easier for me to give you that shot.
I got 3 things to say about that. First thing is, like you just said, the coach is trying to win. Okay. He's trying to keep his job. He's probably got bills to pay, depending on what level you're at. He's trying to win. And if he's a smart coach, he's playing his best players, right? So if you're not on the power play, you're not on the power play for a reason. So my second point would be, before you start whining and moaning and just complaining, have a good, strong look in the mirror and make sure you're really convinced that you should be doing what you should be doing. Because oftentimes, maybe you're not ready. Maybe you're too young. Maybe you're not a power play guy. Maybe you're overvaluing yourself a little bit, right? So make sure you're really doing everything it takes. Because when I look at my career and the times I was bitching and moaning, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't doing everything I could be doing. I just wasn't, period. And I bitched I got cut from one team. I bitched for like 4 years that I got screwed over, quote unquote. And it wasn't until I woke up 5 years later and I said, holy shit, I wasn't doing half of what I should have been doing to make that team. And that's the mindset of a lot of players. They just don't see it. You have to see it. You have to be honest with yourself. And thirdly, about the practice thing, somebody is always watching. A smart coach is always watching. He's always paying attention. And so if you're not getting a shot, 9 times out of 10, you're not getting a shot for a reason. So just keep grinding. If you want to be on the power play, be the guy in the PK that's going a million miles an hour. That's what I would do. I would volunteer to be the PK guy. I'd block shots in practice. I'd drive those power play guys nuts, because I wanted to show the coach I wanted it, right? And they'd be like, why are you going so hard in practice? Well, because I want a chance. And that's the only way you're going to get it. Because when it's a 9-1 game or a 6-1 game and you have a power play, the coach is then going to think, you know what? Matty's been busting his ass. He deserves a shot. And then you might get your shot. Then you might show him something. Then the first line center might get hurt. Who knows? You know what I mean? Things happen. So you got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, and I think self-awareness is such a key component to that, right? If you've got 2 points on the entire season, probably not a great time to come to the coach and say, why am I not on the power play?
I'll tell you a great story real quick. When I was in junior playing in Estevan, we were on a huge losing streak. We were just stinking the bed out on this road trip. So the coach has a meeting before the game, and I'll never, ever forget this quote. He's just chewing us out, basically chewing us out about guys complaining and whining. And we were probably like 20, 30 games in. He looked around the room and he goes, hey, boys, I'll tell you one thing right now. If you don't have a fucking goal yet, you're not a goal scorer, okay? So find another way to contribute. And I thought that was just hilarious. Like I almost, because everyone thinks they're a goal scorer. You know what I mean? And this is kind of off topic, but it's like, maybe you're just not that player. And guys were just, and he was basically saying to some guys, like, you got to go out there and check or fight or stop being so soft, but you got to do something, right? How many guys are goal scorers? 4 on a team or whatever, 5? Sorry about that.
Yeah, if that, no, because it's no different than, when guys make the transition into junior hockey or college hockey or something like that, right? And they're like, what position you play? Well, I'm a center. Not in this league, son. Not in this league. Yeah, you're not, So figure out how to contribute and figure out your role and be self-aware to what you're walking into. And that kind of gets me to
the next point about what winning team and winning organization is players having that willingness to fill those roles, right? When you see the Olympic teams, Team Canada, USA, you'll get a first line guy going to that team being a 4th line checker, right? And they do it willingly. Same with the World Junior teams. You see all those World Junior kids? Those are all first-line players on their teams. They're not fourth-line, third-line guys, but they're filling the roles because they want to win. And so that's something I've also noticed on teams, that when we won, everyone would play everywhere. They wouldn't even care, right? I remember the last time we won, I said, listen, I'll go play third-line center checking because I know I can shut them down. They're like, well, we need you to do this. Well, listen, maybe you need me to do this today, right? And you got to be willing to do those things. And I see a lot of guys having problems with that. I don't know if you do, but you tell a first-line guy he's now a third-line guy, a power play guy, he's now a PK guy. Those winning players, man, they take that in stride. They take that as a challenge. And the guys who aren't winning players with that winning mentality, they're going to sulk now. They're going to say, well, I'm not going to work as hard because I'm not playing where I want to play, right? So I think filling roles is huge.
I think filling roles is huge, and I think when we're talking about the youth side of it, I think that's a very underrated role of parents, is to like get them to accept where they're at and fight to make a change. Not, oh, I got moved down to third line, so my dad's going to talk to the coach, my advisor's going to talk to the coach, I'm going to go talk to the hockey director because we're being treated unfairly. No. It's life. You get punched in the mouth sometimes. You don't always get to do what you want to do, right? But you have to work through it. You have to keep fighting. And I guarantee you, if you take that approach versus the other approach, right, of making the coach's life a living hell, you're probably going to get more results because that coach isn't going to go in, right? If you've got a guy that's just been a pain, not producing, and then still complaining, you're not going to give him that chance. Again, it goes back to coaches are human. Right? Like the chances of you giving him, throwing him a bone randomly goes way down. But if you've been grinding and there's an opportunity where it's like, I could put this guy out. If we get scored on, no big deal. If we don't score a goal here, no big deal. It is what it is. But, maybe I can give a guy a shot. You might get that look.
Yeah, it comes down to earning your coach's trust, right? It's not always about skill or talent. You got to have that coach's trust. And if you don't have it, you know how it is as a coach. I can only imagine how it is as a coach to be on that bench and look down the bench. And you got your guys. You know what I mean? I was always trying to be that guy. When there's a minute left, I wanted the coach to say, Matty, go. There's a big face-off, Matty, go. I was always trying to be that guy. I strive to be that guy. Wasn't the best player, not the most talented. A minute left, I'm on the ice. And if I'm not, I'm just jumping the boards half the time. You know what I mean? Because I want to be out there. I want it to be in my hands. I don't want it to be on the guy beside me hands because maybe doesn't want it as much as I do. Maybe he does. On the winning team, he does. But like you said, earn the coach's trust. He's human. He wants to give you a chance at the end of the day. He wants nothing better than you to succeed. But it's like you said, it comes down to that self-awareness. And I think that's why hockey players make good employees, right? Because they've been in those team environments where things didn't go well. There's a lot going on during a hockey season, right? You don't think about it while you're in it. I know I didn't. It's just like ups and downs, and it's tough to stay even keel and just keep doing your job. And I think that's the advice I can give, is just keep doing your job and just try to do it a little bit better every single day, and you'll get your shots.
Yeah, I think that's a good cap there on sort of a wide topic. We've certainly hit a lot of points, but certainly I think if we can kind of sum it up into one simple sentence for at least the player side of it, it's control what you can control, right? If you do that as an athlete, as a player, that helps create a winning culture. Yeah. Right. When you start to couple it in with a lot of other pieces.
Yeah. I'm just going to say one quick thing is just get your mind right? Control what you can control, get your mind right, keep your mind right. It's going to be a long year. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but you can't let those downs ride out. You can't let those ups make you feel like you're a superstar. Because I've seen that happen too. You start winning a bunch of games, you can't be touched, you're a hero. Don't check me, don't hit me. You got to stay with the grind. Stay with the grind, and the results come in time.
I love it. Matty, you got any more questions in the Q&A hopper, or did we hit them all?
I think we hit them all for this topic. I got a couple questions that are more tactical that maybe we'll get to on some future episodes, but I think we'll keep this one to a quick 41-minute podcast. I think that was a good one. Lots of good points got touched. And if you guys ever want to ask us some questions, where can they find the questions?
Questions you can submit at hockeyshare.com/questions. Or, of course, you can DM us on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, you name it. Matt, I think all yours are at Hockey Pro Training.
At Hockey Pro Training. Hit me up with those questions, and we'd love to get to them. Maybe we'll do another Q&A show in the future. So fire away. And, hit up Kevin if you want as well in the DM. And we will see you guys at the next episode. Anything else to add, Kevin?
Nope. That was episode 6 on winning culture. We'll see you next week for episode 7.
Bye for now.